Major support for these broadcasts is provided by the CUNY TV Foundation, New York Community Bank, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chelsea Lighting, Capital One Bank, Genova Burns, Giantomasi and Webster, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, the Witkoff Group, Greenberg Traurig, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance. Additional support is provided by Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Colliers International New York, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, DDG, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Flushing Bank, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, John Katsimatidis, Red Apple Group, Corman Communities, a.k.a. Hotels, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey Knackle Realty Services, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Popular Community Bank, Sterling and Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, and These Friends.
Last week, we were talking about the career of Judge Milton Mollen. We haven't gotten to his career because we are still right now in France, just being caught for the prisoner of war camp. Okay. The Germans captured
What happened was, I was trying to convince the farmer to get in touch with a French doctor or the resistance. And he kept telling me I had to leave. He wanted to give me civilian clothes, which I wouldn't take because if you're caught in civilian clothes, you'll be automatically executed as a spy. So anyway, he finally said, well, I'm going to talk to the village priest. And he left. And then about a half hour later, a German squad car came with 4 soldiers, jumped out, came in with Tommy guns, machine guns, and captured me.
Right. Now, you're captured. They put you into a hospital because they had a...
No, not yet, but they did finally, because they sent me from the initial place where I was. They interrogated me, and then I wouldn't give them anything but name, rank, and serial number. They finally sent me to Frankfurt, in Frankfurt, Germany, which was their main reception area for POWs, and went through the same routine there, and finally, I did get hospital treatment for my leg there in Frankfurt.
Right, but and you're in this famous Stalag that prisoners.
I was sent to Stalag Luft 3, which was the camp from which 72 RAF or CAF, Royal Canadian Air Force, Royal Australians, New Zealanders, they were predominantly there. That was the camp from which the Great Escape took place. And that was before I got there. And of the 72 got out, 3 got back to England, 69 were recaptured, and then the Gestapo came in and executed 50 of those 69 as an example.
Right. While you're prisoners of war camp, there was the Great March.
Those members of the Allied forces that they hated the most were the Air Force officers because the airplanes brought the war home to Germany. Until late in the war, Germany was not hit. The infantry hadn't been able to get into Germany yet, and the Navy clearly was not there. But the one element of the Allied forces that caused a great deal of damage to Germany was the Air Force. So what they did apparently, they discovered, the Germans would allow the Russians or the Americans, if it was on the west side of the war, to retake these camps, where were POW camps, and free the prisoners, except for the Allied aviators. They were the ones, they referred to us in German papers, because at the prisoner of war camp at Saarbrücken 3, we had German paper available. They used to refer to the Luft gangsters, the air gangsters, people who dropped bombs on them, brought the war home to Germany. In any event, the Russians were advancing. It was the middle of January. It was a bitterly cold night. They lined us all up, all the persons were in the camp, and we started a march. And we kept on the march for 24 hours on that march, from that night to the following night, till we got to some small town. We stopped at intervals, we stopped for a few moments, and then we'd resume again. And we got to this small town where they had some plant or something. There was a building. We went in there. It was bitterly cold that night. And I still remember, I tried to lie down to get some rest, and my body was bouncing off the floor. I couldn't stop my body from bouncing from the cold and everything else. Finally, one of the fellows who had been in the room with me, we had 8 of us were in the same room in the prisoner war camp.
Right, you told me you put the bodies together so you keep warm.
He took off his shirt, and he told me to open up my shirt, and he laid on top of me, and the body warmth from his body stopped my shivering, my shaking. So finally I stopped, and finally I slept for a couple of hours, and then they put us in boxcars and sent us further west to near the Schleswig-Holstein area. There's a little town called Darmstadt. Not Darmstadt, there's a big city, German city, Darmstadt, but this was Darmstadt, T-A-R-M-S-T-A-D-T, where we were. And there, from that camp, I and a Canadian escaped together. We got out, and we made it. We were going to do is travel at night and stay hidden during the daytime, and we kept up that way. And we had, see, I'm not mechanically inclined, but some of those long-time prisoners, English, Australian, New Zealanders, Canadians, some of them were very, very handy with things. We would be periodically, the Gestapo, the Abwehr, the Secret Service, German Secret Service would come in and do a search of this prisoner war camp, look for radios, things like that, because we would build our own radios.
So you escape from the prisoner of war camp. The war ends. I'm going to move forward, but before that, there's a comment which was written up about you in an article, wonderful article in the magazine. You wanted to go back. You wanted to go back to service, and, and the doctor said to you, "You're abnormal."
No, what happened is, when you got back, if you're an escaped prisoner, when you got back, you had to take 2 weeks of hospitalization and observation. And you had doctors pouring all over you, psychiatrists. Every day for 1 hour, I'd be with the psychiatrist. And there was a psychiatrist, and he'd ask me questions such as, how would you feel about it if you were ordered to go back into active combat duty right now and start dropping bombs again? I said, that's my order, that's what I would do. He said, well, how would you feel about if they wanted to send you to the West Coast to bomb Japan and go on missions? I said, if that's what my orders were, that's what I would do. I'd do whatever, wherever they send me. We're still at war. I said, so that kind of dialogue existed. But after the 2 weeks, I was leaving. They released me to go back. So I thought I'd just stop in and say goodbye to him, because we'd gotten fairly friendly, because I'd see him every day for those 2 weeks for about an hour. So I stopped just to say goodbye to him. So when I stopped, he said to me, would you like to see the final sentence of my report about you? I said, sure, if you want to show it to me. So he showed me, he says, considering the circumstances this man has undergone, how do you put it? He is abnormally normal in terms of impact upon him and in respect to his attitudes, abnormally normal.
You come back and you decide to go to St. John's College.
Well, when I was released, I was still in the service, as a matter of fact, and I guess this was late October '45, and I had not yet been discharged. I was stationed in Atlantic City. My wife was a graduate of Brooklyn College, and she got a job as a junior executive in an old department store, A&S, right there. And so, and that was just around the corner, actually, from St. John's. St. John's at that time was located in downtown Brooklyn.
So you go to St. John's, and what you did is you did a combined degree.
What happened, St. John's offered a program whereby at the end of 3 years, as an undergrad, if you wanted to transfer to law school, you could transfer and go to law school for the necessary period of time on that and get a dual degree for the undergrad and both. But But at the end of 2 years, and I had done very well in college and got good grades. I was near the top of the class. And I told the dean I wanted to transfer to law school because I'd given up 4 years of my time.
For the military, right.
Yeah. And I wanted to get going in my career.
When you graduated law school, you and 2 classmates start a little business,
Well, the
right?
last year in law school, we agreed to form a partnership, 3 of us. We were all we'd all done well. We were near the top of the class, all of us. And we would decide we'd go out together if we were all admitted at the same time. So we all took the bar exam. We passed it the first time, the 3 of us, and we formed our own firm and started doing that.
Now, what's interesting about the firm is you had one of your buddies, one of the 3 of you, also was a musician, and once he wants to give, he said,
well, when I came in on the Monday morning, I find some cash on my desk. So I called, I said, Vinny, what is this? He says, well, I earned it over the weekend. I said, what do you mean you earned it? I thought he did some law work of some kind. He played the saxophone, and he used to do, he was Catholic by religion, but he used to do anything, bar mitzvahs, weddings, anything, any nationality and any religion.
So he made the gig, and he gave you a cut.
He bought
said,
the money,
"We're
he got
partners."
paid for it, he brought it in. I said to him, that's not part of our partnership, that's personal, that's yours.
Yeah.
He refused to, he
So
insisted.
you leave the guys, and then you say to yourself, you speak to your late wife, and you say, I'm going to spend the next 2 years of my life in civil service, right?
No, that isn't the way it happened. Very different.
You tell me.
What happened is, the dean called me one day at Royal Liverpool to tell me that a lawyer he knew, relatively young lawyer that he knew, very bright fellow, wanted the bright student to look at some legal issue and discuss it with him. So I said, well, Dean, you know, I haven't got time. In addition to school, in addition to working at Royal Liverpool, I was on the law review. That took a lot of time. I helped to reinstate the moot court. That's why to this day they have what they call the Milton Mollen Moot Court Honor Society that they named after me. And so I said, and my son was born in the last year in law school, so I had an infant at home. So I said, well, I don't even have time to meet him to discuss what he wants to discuss. He says, I want you to get to know him and meet him. He's a very nice fellow, and I think you can be helpful to him, and it'll be good for you. So I said, okay, Dean, if that's what you want. So I met him on a Saturday on the weekend, and I worked on a case with him. He had a kind of tricky legal case, a tough one, and I researched it for him, and I gave him my views, and ultimately he won that case.
Okay, you go to work for the Corporation Counsel, correct?
Well, the man who was the head of the firm that I did that research for, not the one who I had spoken with, but the head of the firm, became the Corporation Counsel of the City of New York. The Corporation Counsel was the point.
And then you get a job
then
working for the office of the corporation.
He insisted that I come into the office with him. I was reluctant. I didn't want to leave my 2 colleagues and all of that. But finally, I made a decision to go in there. And when I did it, people asked me, well, why are you doing that? Why aren't you trying to be nice? So they'd say, with all your ability and the way you work and everything else, you got a career ahead of you. Why do you want to go into city service at this point? I said, well, the Corporation Counsel's office is a great office. They do a lot of litigation. I want to really be a litigator. I want to learn to be a good trial lawyer. I said, and so I figured I'd go there for 2 years. I'd give 2 years to the office, and then I'd leave and go back into practice on that. And 42 years later, I left.
You ran with Lindsay, correct?
Yes.
In the campaign.
65.
In 65. You were always involved with Wagner, and during the time that you were involved with Wagner, you were very instrumental in some of the major effect in the real estate. And one of the things that you really were involved with is that the Tishman family were building this small little building at 666 Fifth Avenue. Talk to me about that with the air rights.
I was chief of the division that dealt with representing the agencies, the city agencies, like the building department. Commissioner Gilroy, who was then the Commissioner of Buildings, wrote a request for an opinion as to whether or not the developer of 666 Fifth Avenue, the Tishman family, could they buy the air rights? There's an O'Donnell Library around the corner,
Right around the
adjacent to the site. And what Tishman wanted to do was pay the O'Donnell Library for the right to build above that, but he would apply to his
and the
building.
library could use the money, so it
That's
was
right. So it was a good deal for the library. They wanted it.
But people wouldn't realize that until that time there was not transferable air rights.
Until that time, there was an issue of whether or not air rights could be transferred.
Now, another thing that you did in your career
But
is
to protect that, I require that all these things be put in the building's file, in the building department, so that any successor owner would
later
know
on.
that they're limited, that they can't develop the air rights over the...
Let's talk about you and Bobby Kennedy.
Bill Vanden Heuvel, called me. I had known him, I'd worked with him on some things in 1960. So in 1964, he called me the Wednesday before the convention. We were going down on Friday. And he asked me, would I be willing to go fly to Washington Friday night, stay at the Georgetown Inn, and he would pick me up Saturday morning and drive me to Hickory Hills, which is where Bobby Kennedy was living at that time, outside of Washington with his wife, and help prepare Bobby, because Tuesday he was going to announce his candidacy for the United States Senate from the steps of Gracie Mansion. At first I didn't know what to say, because I knew there was a possibility Wagner might decide to run for the Senate, and my loyalty was to Wagner. So I said to Van, I have to think about that. But the next morning, before I went to Atlantic City, I used to have breakfast every Thursday morning with Wagner, just the two of us, at Gracie Mansion. So by this time, I'd become very close to Wagner. So I asked him, I told him about the phone call from Vanden Heuvel, and I said, is it true that Bobby's going to announce his candidacy from Gracie Mansion? And he said, yes, I know about it, and I've approved it and all that. He said, well, he wants me to help prepare. The big charge during the campaign against Bobby from the other side was that he was a...
carpetbagger, okay?
Yeah, that's right. There's a word, but...
Right. So you were involved with Bobby Kennedy, but some of the things that you also were involved with was on the West Side. If Milton Mollen wasn't around, there wouldn't have been certain events that took place on the West Side and Cadman Plaza and housing and Mitchell Lama. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the housing.
Well, but you asked me about Bobby. That's what I got off into that. But in any event, I met Bobby. We spent from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, and just trying to alert him about New York issues and all of that. And we developed a good relationship on that. Then I went back to Atlantic City, and then I was back at work. What had happened was that in 1960, the Slum Clearance Committee was done away with. There was what they consider a mini scandal involving Moses and the way he was running it, and favoritism he had for certain banks and whatever. And Wagner decided that he wanted to have a completely new picture in control of the housing program. So he asked me to oversee the drafting of legislation. By this time, I'd become close to him, and I attended his cabinet meetings. We drafted legislation to create a new agency, Housing and Redevelopment Board, and all the housing programs, except for public housing, all other housing programs were put into the Housing and Redevelopment Board. In fact, the Mitchell Lama program, which had been spread, it was located in the controller's office, where it really didn't belong. And it was just a bureau within the controller's office. It was taken out of there and put in as part of the Housing and Redevelopment Board.
Because of your work, I mean, the Upper West Side, which was a dangerous neighborhood, a lot of things weren't happening over there. There was major new construction that took place.
Yeah, it covered 20 blocks from 87th Street to 97th Street, from Central Park West to Amsterdam Avenue. Yeah, Columbus and then Amsterdam Avenue, 20 blocks. That had been in the works for 7 years. It had started, Jack Felt had been chairman of the Planning Commission. That was his baby. He really wanted that. But he'd been working on it for 7 years. It had gotten nowhere. They started in 1955, and I became chairman of the Housing Redevelopment Board in January of 1962. So I was 7 years there on that. And the side streets were terrible. Drugs, prostitution.
I know that you became the presiding judge over the Supreme Court of the state of New York.
Of the appellate division
Of the appellate
Supreme Court.
And during that period of time, there were a couple of major cases. Okay, there was this Gene Harris, who had killed this doctor. You know, it was only 5 bullets, right? That's what you said to me. It was 5 bullets to the head. Accidental death that came to you.
Well, her defense was accidental, which was kind of ridiculous.
I think that was an interesting case. But another case, I think the Brother Lowe case, the Brother Fox case.
Brother Fox case.
The Brother Fox
the right
case.
To die.
The right to die was another major situation that you had
in New York. There had never been a decision by an appellate court on the right to die on that. The only case I knew about, there was a case in New Jersey that got an awful lot of publicity. What happened was that after oral argument, but before we wrote our decision, Brother Fox died. So the normal thing to do for a court, particularly an appellate court, is to say it's moot. There's no point. He's dead. What the case was about was his right to die. And he was a Christian brother, and he had a priest who was a friend of his, and the priest was insisting that they had discussed it and that they had agreed that when he got to the point physically, he was incapable of doing a lot of things, different things. The priest would seek to have him put it, do not resuscitate, and just let him pass away on that. And the district attorney of Nassau County at that time opposed that for religious reasons. And it was a very sensitive issue. It had never been decided in New York by an appellate court. And there was a lot of publicity about the New Jersey case, but New York hadn't done it. So we could have, the normal thing to have done once we were told he was dead was to say it's moot now. There's no point in deciding the case. There's nothing left to decide. He's dead on that. But we talked about it. It was my case. If anybody was going to write about it, I was the one who was going to write, because to use the old expression, I caught the case. It was my case to report on and to write about. And we decided, I had people I knew, hospital administrators, doctors, were very anxious to get to know what was legal, what was permitted, what was not permitted, in addition to lawyers and other people who were interested and all that. So we decided to address the issue, whether or not you could do it. And I wrote the longest opinion I ever wrote on any subject. It was 73 pages. And because I addressed it from a legal viewpoint, from a medical viewpoint, from a hospital administration viewpoint, from a religious viewpoint. I quoted from the Pope's encyclicals, and we sustained the right of the person under certain circumstances to be put to death.
Okay.
So that was a groundbreaking case in New York.
No question.
At the time.
There was the McLaughlin case. The McLaughlin case is in Marine Park in Brooklyn. There was a kid murdered, and then he was convicted. But in reality, there was a question of doubt if he really did the case, which went to you. You reviewed the case, and then subsequently, due to some efforts, you got involved.
No,
and you had
well, what happened was he was convicted.
I know he was convicted, but I can't even talk about it because I got to talk about your career. You then worked for Dinkins. You got involved with Dinkins. You were an assistant deputy mayor. Deputy mayor for Dinkins. And then after 42 years, you decided it's time to get a job, okay? And you get a job and you get involved with the arbitration, JAMS, correct?
Mediation and arbitration.
Mediation arbitration over there, which was the largest private arbitration organization.
The largest for-profit organization doing that kind of work. The AAA is supposed to be a non-profit institution, and we were a for-profit institution.
And then you decide...
And they asked me to open up the office in New York.
And you run that. And then you decide to... There was this kid, a kid named Mollen, okay, who was practicing law, and then you became of counsel with this law firm called what?
Well,
You don't have time.
Graubard, it ultimately became Graubard, Mollen, et cetera,
Okay.
et cetera.
And even
The
today.
Mollen was Scott Mollen, not
Right,
me.
I know, okay. And that's what we're going to get to. So, and then in 2001, you joined of counsel of the firm of Herrick Feinstein, that you've been there.
Well, 7 of us left the firm, the
And then you
Graubard firm, and we went to
So
Herrick
now
Feinstein.
let's talk about the kids. You have Scott, who is the senior partner at Herrick Feinstein.
Yes,
And you have a daughter
chief
also.
of the real, co-chief of the real estate
And
division.
you have a daughter.
I have a daughter who's the principal of a school for developmentally
What's her name,
disabled
please,
children.
if we don't give the name?
Ellen.
And what about grandchildren?
I have 2 grandchildren, and I have 2 great-grandchildren.
Okay.
2 grandchildren, the 2 most beautiful girls in the world, and my great-grandchildren I have a great-granddaughter and a great-grandson.
And the grandchildren's names are what?
The daughter is Alexa, and the boy is Griffin.
Okay. So, you know, for the kid, I literally have to say, the kid from Brooklyn, you know, who figured that he was never going to really work in civil service, you know, just 2 years for 42 years. And, you know, I omitted, and, you know, people can watch it separate. You were involved with the Mollen Commission. And the Mollen Commission.
Yeah, that was after I left the deputy mayor's job. I thought I was through with government, and I was in private enterprise. And then the mayor asked me,
to do the Mollen Commission.
urged me very hard to.
And as opposed to people thinking that everybody knew about the Mollen Commission, I told the whole story without the Mollen Commission. And I'm so happy that I've been able to do the life of Milton Mollen. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.